From an ancient tribe known as the Parisi to a small Roman town built on the world's most romantic swamp to a giant compass built to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution, Paris has so much to be curious about. So, allons-y! Remember when you were a child and all you asked was why? Well, I never quite outgrew that whole quest for knowledge phase. In fact, I've made a career out of asking who, what, where, why, and how as an arts and travel journalist for the past 20 years. So, if I have an insatiable curiosity about the exciting, inspiring, beautiful world of art, architecture, and hidden history all around us, I bet you do too. This isn't your typical what to do on a vacation travel show. Oh no, this is your all-access pass to a deeper understanding of the world's great art and architecture, people and places, history, and how did they do that. So, come along on our educational journey, our field trip for grown-ups who have never quite grown up, and learn on Curious Traveler. Curious Traveler is made possible by the following.
Europe is a treasure trove of fascinating history, rich culture, and renowned cities. Ama Waterways River Cruises offers a way to see all this wonder in person. You can discover more at amawaterways.com.
Towering fjords, Nordic culture, Scandinavian heritage, the Northern Lights. So many ways to experience Scandinavia. Adventures begin at firebirdtours.com. Blue Ribbon Bags, baggage protection made simple. We track and return your delayed baggage around the world. We send automatic email updates so you can do what you love. BlueRibbonBags.com. Anatomy, European travel clothing for women. Anatomy is designed to fly. Anatomy.com.
Have you ever wondered why was the Eiffel Tower built in the first place? Why is Paris known as the City of Light? And why has its beautiful architecture been copied all over the world? It's time to get curious about Paris. Ah, Paris, the center of style, fashion, good taste, and tasty goodies. From the berets to the baguettes to the bicyclettes, here's what I'm curious about in the City of Light. Why was the Eiffel Tower built here, but Sacré-Cœur here? Why are people walking on this Beaux-Arts masterpiece? Why did the Impressionist movement start here? And the Can-Can? And what does a windmill have to do with it? What is this temple to music, and what is it doing in the middle of an intersection? Why is this street so wide? And why is shopping celebrated so lavishly in Paris? I always knew it was an art form. And last but not least, why is Paris the City of Light? Icons are icons for a reason, so let's begin our curious journey into the City of Light with that Parisian icon that was almost torn down. The Eiffel Tower. It's hard to believe, but the symbol of Paris didn't start off in its now lofty role. It was simply another cool exhibit at the 1889 World Expo, the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution.
Liberté, égalité, fraternité.
But if you look closely, the Eiffel Tower looks almost unfinished. Why no clothes on the Eiffel Tower? Well, plain old iron and rivets may look simple today, but this was during the Industrial Age, and to be able to construct a tower to the staggering height of nearly 1,000 feet was an engineering marvel. It was the tallest man-made structure in the world for 41 years.
Wow!
Gustave Eiffel compared his work of art to the glorious pyramids in Egypt, but others weren't so welcoming at first. There's a story of one artist who claimed to eat lunch in the Eiffel Tower every day because it was the one place in Paris where he didn't have to look at it. Criticism or not, the Eiffel Tower was built in over 2 years with 2.5 million rivets and proudly stood as the glorious entryway to that 1889 World Expo. And as a World Expo exhibit, it was meant to be temporary and was scheduled to be torn down after 20 years. But to spare it from the wrecking ball, Gustave later placed a communications tower at the top, which proved quite useful during World Wars I and II. So the Eiffel Tower was saved. Hooray! Running down the elegant legs of the tower were thousands of gas lamps, which brings us to another Parisian icon, the City of Light. Sure, Paris is très magnifique, all lit up at night, And the nickname La Vie Lumière partially comes from those beautiful gas street lamps. But the more cerebral reason for the nickname City of Light had arrived in Paris about a century before. With the Age of Enlightenment in the 1700s, the bold new ideas of liberty, progress, tolerance, and fraternity were sweeping Paris. This, of course, led to the French Revolution in 1789, which was celebrated a century later with the Eiffel Tower and its lights in 1889. Don't you love it when it all ties together? Next, we venture out from the Eiffel Tower and see how this one structure influenced the rest of Paris. In addition to the Eiffel Tower, there are a few more massive monuments still standing from the World Expos of 1889 and 1900. Like the Grand Palais des Champs-Élysées behind me. It was inspired by London's Crystal Palace, and of course it is a masterpiece in Beaux-Arts style in iron, steel, and glass. And you wouldn't be surprised to find out it is dedicated by the French Republic to the glory of French art. The Grand Palais des Champs-Élysées was originally an exhibition hall for the Universal Expo of 1900. Nearly 800 feet long, big enough to fit a blimp in here.
Yikes!
Outside, there are wonderful allegorical groupings, including this one, Immortality Prevailing Over Time. It faces the Petit Palais across the street and leads us to yet another work of art just steps away. Another beautiful survivor of that World Expo is this bridge, Pont Alexandre III, named after Tsar Alexander III and a celebration of the Franco-Russian alliance of 1892. It also is a Beaux-Arts masterpiece, and here's my favorite part. How often are you allowed to walk on a work of art? And like a work of art, the bridge is framed by 4 massive pillars, each representing a different era of French history. Atop each pillar is a fame, fame of the sciences, fame of the arts, fame of commerce, and fame of industry. And the span of the bridge is a Belle Epoque masterpiece, centered by the nymphs of the Neva and nymphs of the Seine, holding illuminating torches, and your stroll is illuminated as well by these beautiful Art Nouveau street lamps, some of the original gas lamps that made Paris the City of Light.
Ah.
Did someone say art? Yeah, I think we'll find some of that here. From the Louvre to the street artists to the Beaux-Arts architecture, everywhere you look, Paris is synonymous with art. And there's no artist's hub more celebrated than the funky, artsy, glorious Parisian neighborhood of Montmartre. Here, during the Belle Epoque, Monet, Manet, Degas, Pissarro, and other great artists all lived and worked here. Renoir painted Sunday afternoons spent under windmills. Van Gogh painted windmills too, as well as wonky women in cafes. And Toulouse-Lautrec then painted Van Gogh and scantily clad women in cabarets. So, what was in the water or the paints here in Montmartre from the late 1800s to the early 1900s to produce so many master artists? The answer, the beautiful countryside. In protest to the strict realism of the Académie des Beaux-Arts, a new art form developed out here en plein air, Impressionism. Also, the popularity of photography meant that these artists were free to create the wonderfully brushstroked, dotted, blurry until you move back works of art. But there was a more pragmatic reason this incredible pool of talent was drawn to draw here: cheap rent.
The houses were very cheap around here. It was absolutely not modernized. You had no canalization, no tap water, no gas at every floor like the new neighborhoods of Paris, so they could not afford the new neighborhoods.
In fact, there's a funny story about Picasso's creative solution to his unheated apartment.
When you look at the pictures of Picasso in those days, he looks so fat in the winter. He's not fat, he's actually quite skinny, but he's got all of his clothes on because it's so cold that he needs to keep warm.
And Picasso lived with his fellow artists on a boat. Sort of. This building behind me is the Bateau Lavoir. Now, bateau means boat, lavoir means to wash. And it's named that because the building is in the shape of the old boats on the Seine where people would go and lean over the side and wash their clothes. But that's not why this building is famous. It used to be an artist commune for the likes of Picasso and Modigliani. Picasso painted Les Demoiselles d'Avignon while living here. It is considered a proto-cubism painting, and you can already see hints of his new art form to be fully developed later. While Picasso was busy painting sharp-edged ladies, his neighbor was creating lovely works like these. Behind this blue door and up to the top is where Van Gogh lived from 1886 to 1888. Of course, during his starving artist days. When wasn't he a starving artist? And in this apartment, he lived with his brother, who of course was paying his rent. Now, from his view, he painted some wonderful paintings of the Parisian rooftops, but we didn't get any of the Van Gogh masterpieces while he lived here. That was because he had yet to meet the other artists living in Montmartre who influenced him. Yes, in his pre-sunflower, pre-starry night, pre-ear-chopping days, Van Gogh painted works like this one of the cafe owner he loved, where you can see the development of his unique creative style. It is here at the Café du Tambourin that Van Gogh famously traded his paintings for meals. Now, while the artists may not have been able to afford food, they definitely could afford wine, which brings us to Montmartre's other claim to fame, the legendary nightlife. Ooh la la!
A lot of the Impressionists are interested in the fun life of Paris, and this is where it was all happening. You have to imagine that in the 19th century, Montmartre is a place where you have very cheap wine, because this used to be an abbey before, and when the nunnery was closed down during the French Revolution, the vineyard stayed. So all of a sudden, it becomes the place to be if you want to have cheap wine.
So it goes from the abbeys to the cabarets.
Completely.
Two completely different groups. That's so funny.
The thing they have in common is wine.
So the wine begat the nightclubs, which begat the can-can. And fittingly, the first can-can was inside a Montmartre windmill, a famous red one to be exact, founded in 1889. This, of course, is the world-famous Moulin Rouge, which translates simply to Red Mill. By the time this was built, the windmill was already the symbol of Montmartre because of its history as farmland. Now, the Moulin Rouge was never a functioning windmill, but it had a whole lot else going for it. It was built in 1889, the same year as the Eiffel Tower, and it was one of the first buildings in the district to have electricity on the outside of the building. And here, those lights spun on the windmill. And last but certainly not least, it was of course the place to come to see the can-can, because those ladies were showing their legs. Ooh la la! From the sinners to the sacred, we now move from Montmartre's artsy history to its religious history. Overlooking Paris is the majestic Sacré-Cœur Basilica, glowing white atop the highest point in Paris. Its architectural style is unique to say the least, sticking out of the Paris skyline like a beautiful sore thumb. Built during the Belle Époque, the same time period those Impressionist artists lived here in Montmartre, the basilica's artists chose to create the church in a unique Romano-Byzantine style, for a reason. It was all in protest to the perceived extravagances of the Second Empire style, like Charles Garnier's design for the Paris Opera House. Well, Charles Garnier was the one who protested the Eiffel Tower, so what goes around comes around, I guess. But back to our basilica. Why is Sacré-Cœur so bright white? Teeth whitening strips? Nope. It's made out of a special type of stone that emits calcite when it rains, which acts as a natural bleaching agent. Sounds pretty divine to me. But why was the basilica built? Well, because France lost the Franco-Prussian War.
The church tried to get some power back from that and told everybody that the reason why France had lost is because we were not religious enough. And so France had to repent. And
That's how this
is
okay.
how this was born.
But why here, on this mountain? Well, the history of this sacred hill goes back a lot further than the Franco-Prussian War. to 250 AD, the time of the Romans, and a Christian bishop named Dennis.
He was being quite successful at a time when Christianity was completely forbidden by the Romans. So the Romans had him captured. They brought him up to the top of the hill and they asked him to kneel down in front of the Temple of Mars.
But the legend says that Bishop Denis wouldn't bow down in front of a pagan god, so he was beheaded.
Yikes!
Because of his martyrdom, that bishop became a saint, and Saint Denis became a patron saint of France. And it is partially how we get the name Montmartre, Mountain of the Martyrs.
Ah.
The other reason is even more curious, because Sacré-Cœur isn't the first divine temple to stand here in this close to the heavens spot. Sacré-Cœur is on the highest point of Paris for a reason. That's because this has been known as the Hill of the Gods since pre-Roman times. In fact, Montmartre used to be translated as Mountain of Mars. But of course, when Christians overtook the pagans, they then made Montmartre mean Mountain of the Martyrs. Many centuries later, in the late 19th century, the beautiful Sacré-Cœur was built and has been overlooking Paris ever since. That's right. Before it was the Mount of the Martyrs, it was Mont Marcis, Mountain of Mars. Mars?
Montmartre was the place where the Celts used to go to talk to the gods.
Now, did they choose this kind of like a Mount Olympus for the Greeks because it was up high and closer to the heavens? Was it that sort of ancient thinking?
They used to think of it as the highest point so that they could talk to the gods.
So, this near the heavens hill started as the Mount of Mars, and now the Mountain of the Christian Martyrs. Today, it is topped by a gleaming white work of art overlooking Montmartre neighborhood. That must have been favored by the gods to create so much beautiful art. Next, we visit a different type of temple, a temple of music. Standing proudly and stately and oh so prettily in the middle of one of the busiest, noisiest intersections of Paris is the serene and elegant Paris Opera House.
The front of the Opera House, true to the Beaux-Arts style of architecture, is all that really counted, is this perspective, is this main view up the avenue to see the glory of, neoclassical elements combined in this one facade.
In its over-the-top Second Empire Beaux-Arts style, the Paris Opera House, or Opera Garnier, is one of the most famous opera houses in the world, and not just because it is the setting for Phantom of the Opera. And its beauty is truly appreciated when you read it. Yes, read the building. It's chock full of symbolism and mythology. Greeting us at ground level are the allegories of drama, song, dance, and poetry. Perched above our heads are the heads of the great composers, including Beethoven, Bach, and Mozart. And crowning it all is Apollo, the Greek god of the arts, holding a lyre, flanked by harmony on the left and poetry on the right, glittering in gold. But what are all these N's for? Na-na-na when you sing along at the opera? No. That's for Napoleon III. And so is this entire wing of the building called the Pavillon de l'Empereur. This side entrance is a very important entrance. It wasn't just for anybody.
No, this was the entrance of Napoleon III and Eugenie, okay? Special emperor's entrance, special ramp leading right up out onto the stage, really. So they had their own private balcony on orchestra level, only them.
But here's the funny part of the story. He wasn't around by the time this was actually finished for him, was he?
No, he was not. He was out of power by 1875 when it was completed.
And also at this entrance is someone just as important as old Napoleon III. Sorry, buddy. And the reason for the Opera House's alternate name, Opera Garnier. The designer, Charles Garnier, the same guy who protested the Eiffel Tower, then had his opera house protested by the architect of Sacré-Cœur. Boy, Parisians. What I think is hilarious, inside you have a lot of space for something, but not a lot of space for the other thing.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's really about, what opera meant back then.
Right.
Opera was so much about socialization.
Like here in the grand staircase made of multicolored marble, with female torchères and heavenly painted ceilings overhead of even more Greek mythology and celebrations of music. And you enter in a whole different world.
And it was heavenly. It was the idea of ascending into the opera. You're coming off of the street and you're working your way into this elitist art and...
A temple to music.
Yes.
I like it. Well, eventually, one must leave and descend back into reality. And when you do, you step out onto the wide Avenue de l'Opéra with a direct view of the Louvre, with no buildings and no trees blocking the view. That is no accident.
So this is l'Avenue de l'Opéra, and it's one of the main arteries that was really sliced through Paris, following the orders of Haussmann.
Georges Eugène Haussmann was the man hired to tear down Paris between 1853 and 1870.
The motivation for that was health, because there was a lot of derelict buildings. Population was concentrated in a very small area, and this was opportunity to really create new quality public space.
So Haussmann created wide boulevards and avenues like Champs-Élysées and Rue de Rivoli, dotted with new public parks, and all leading to and from major public monuments like Arc de Triomphe, the Louvre, and the Paris Opera House. And the Haussmann streets are lined with those quintessential Parisian buildings, light-colored stone, about 6 stories high, capped with those beautiful Parisian gray slate tile roofs with dormer windows sticking out. One look and you know you're in Paris.
Why does Paris look the way that it does?
Well, I like to go back to really the Gothic style, Gothic architecture. The French Gothic tradition, which is a French style, kind of was tacked on to the Italian Renaissance to show Frenchness. The roof is the only thing that's French that was added on to an Italian palazzo.
And what an iconic Parisian rooftop it is.
And so the roof line we're looking at, we call it the mansard roof.
Right.
And the mansard roof gets its name from a French architect called Francois Mansart.
Now, I always thought a mansard roof was basically to cheat taxes, because if you had that extra attic space, it didn't really count as an extra etage, an extra floor. Is that true?
It is. It is true.
I love that story.
And then he just found a great way to make it aesthetic.
In the early 1800s, there was another distinctly Parisian architectural movement going on to save us from the noise outside in the city, to take us inside to these new arcades. You'll see it's quiet inside, noisy outside. Quiet inside, noisy outside. Some things never change.
Indoor shopping malls and store window displays may seem pretty common today, but back in the 17 and 1800s, a shopping arcade like this was extraordinaire and très élégant. But you won't believe what these elegant arcades used to be.
In the beginning, literally 2 buildings, the alley in between, and then maybe the backs of the buildings would be opened up and become shops, and you put a little archway over it.
Just covered over.
It was just an alley.
This was in part an alley. It was also in part, as we get further down, the courtyard of a palace that had been seized during the French Revolution. A lot of property was seized, a lot of religious property.
And now what do we do with it?
Paris saw about 100 of these lovely little spaces come about between 1800 and 1830. And shopping became a see and be seen leisure activity.
It really catered to, the wealthy. It really catered to the wealthy, and you can see that in the attention to the detail. So there are a lot of reference to Roman and Greek antiquity, and the little bitty details.
And covering all this lovely design detail is a structural engineering marvel, that glass and iron ceiling. Look familiar? It's just like the ceilings of those iconic Parisian train stations and the Eiffel Tower.
This all really comes about with the Industrial Revolution. It's mass production of iron elements and glass elements, cheap. They could be produced cheaply, and they could be used to cover not only the ceilings but the walls.
And if you like a glass and iron ceiling overhead as you shop, then you will love this one. The Galerie Lafayette, near the Paris Opera House, inspired by the Paris Opera House. Doesn't it look just like a theater in here? Only in Paris could the place where you buy your socks be so très chic. So, from the simple building materials of the Industrial Age used to create an ode to the ancient pyramids, celebrating the Age of Enlightenment, turning the city below into the City of Light, to the glorious remnants of the World Expos that brought the world to Paris, to the cradle of creativity for master artists who couldn't pay the rent but could check out the Can-Can and create new art forms in their spare time, to the Hill of the Gods, whether that god be Celtic, Roman, or Christian, to a glorious temple to music with pathways cleared out so that everyone could revel in it. Back to those simple building materials that make Paris anything but simple, with a few uber-elegant temples to fashion and art thrown in for good measure. Paris has so much to be curious about.
Thank you for joining us on our educational journey, and hopefully now you're even more curious about the who, what, where, why, and how of Paris. As they say here in Paris, la vie est belle.
Curious Traveler is made possible by the following.
Europe is a treasure trove of fascinating history, rich culture, and renowned cities. Ama Waterways River Cruises offers a way to see all this wonder in person. You can discover more at amawaterways.com.
Towering fjords, Nordic culture, Scandinavian heritage, the Northern Lights. So many ways to experience Scandinavia. Adventures begin at firebirdtours.com. Blue Ribbon Bags, baggage protection made simple. We track and return your delayed baggage around the world. We send automatic email updates so you can do what you love. BlueRibbonBags.com. Anatomy, European travel clothing for women. Anatomy is designed to fly. Anatomy.com.
Still curious? Go to CuriousTravelerTV.com and follow us on Facebook at Curious Traveler TV, on Twitter at Curious Trav TV, and on Instagram at Curious Traveler TV.